Welcome to Bat Lessons, the Batman History Podcast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Brian.
And this time we're having a little bit of a Halloween chat about Scarecrow.
I imagine others are asking this question right now, but didn't we do Scarecrow already?
We did. On episode 6 of the show, in our very first year, we had a Halloween episode. The episode wasn't really about Scarecrow. The format of the show back then was a little more loosey-goosey, a little bit more all over the place. It's a fun episode if you want to go back for it. We spent like the first half talking about Dracula and the history of that and how Dracula inspired Batman. We spent a fair amount of time talking about the World's Fair and how that connected to World's Finest, because first appearance of Scarecrow, World's Finest number 3. And then at the end, we did talk about that first appearance of Scarecrow, but we just kind of read the story to you. That was probably the low light of the episode and of the show back then. So we didn't cover things like inspiration. We didn't cover things like the climate that Scarecrow is coming out of. And we get people asking all the time for episodes about Scarecrow. It's one of the most requested. So I thought, why not? Why not revisit on our third Halloween episode, if you can believe that.
And back then we were just a podcast, right? Like we don't have the video. So
I mean, I have video. Well, we never released video of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those days as well. We were just trying to cover a lot of ground. Like, I think if we wanted to like really dig our heels in and like do a full like Batman history, we could have chunked that one episode up into like 4 episodes.
Yes, I did not know what I used to come with like 15 pages of notes.
Yeah, and we were always worried about time. Like shorter. But we were cramming stuff in. Those were good times. But yeah, now we're a little bit tighter. So this one's just going to be Scarecrow. Indeed.
Do you have a favorite Scarecrow?
Oh gosh, the Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, that Scarecrow. Love that Scarecrow.
I really love in those games the things they did with the environments, where like you would be in the asylum 1 minute and you'd turn around and you turn back and then all of a sudden you're in Crime Alley, or they did a lot of stuff to like mess with your brain.
Yeah. It was like a nightmare. Right.
Exactly.
And I really loved how it just kind of skewed your perception quite a bit. Where actually I have been playing the Hogwarts Legacy, and they have it's part of the expansion. They just did a thing like that where you're like, this doesn't seem quite right. I need to go back. And when you turn around, it's like a completely different room. You know, it's got some of the trick. And it also reminds me the Scarecrow in Arkham reminds me of like Doctor Who kind of stuff, where it's like kind of like the Weeping Angels, where they just like are sneaking up on you, like things are moving. It's good stuff. And then as far as the Scarecrow himself, I really like his like syringe gloves. I think there's some really I don't know, creepy about that. I mean, reminiscent of like Friday the 13th. No, not Friday. Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Doctor Who episode that comes to mind is the Weeping Angels one, right? Yeah. Where they turn around and the statues aren't moving, they turn back and the statues are closer or whatever.
Yeah.
There was BioShock on the Xbox 360 back in the day, had moments like that too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty good. If I had to choose a favorite Scarecrow, I probably Arkham's up there. Like it was a game time decision whether I was going to choose that or if you chose Arkham, Batman Begins for me, I think is pretty good. Yeah. Probably because it's my first real deep introduction to Scarecrow. I wasn't that plugged into Batman back when those movies came out. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know what to expect really from that movie, and it gave me a villain I'd never seen before. There are criticisms that people have out there about Scarecrow. One of the popular ones is that he's kind of always a henchman or a lackey. He's not really important in his own story because of that. So like The Long Halloween, which we were talking about, he shows up in there briefly, but it's really kind of as a accessory to Two-Face. There are other comic stories where he shows up and he's kind of, a henchman for the Joker. And Batman Begins is kind of that way too, where he's the villain for that story, except he's really not. It's Ra's al Ghul. Yeah. So it kind of has that problem. And then the Arkham has the other criticism, which is that the character of, Scarecrow is boiled down to the fear toxin, right? That it is used as a vehicle to tell a story about Bruce or about Dick or about Tim or whoever, right? Because they're dealing with their fears, and Scarecrow doesn't have a motivation, doesn't have like a reason for existing beyond just like being the fear toxin delivery mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So there are people out there that kind of lament there's not been the great, seminal Scarecrow story yet.
Yeah, I think I think I would probably agree with them in the sense that like I think that fear being the villain, like the primary antagonist being coping with fear and stuff is a really powerful story element. Like it's pretty classic. My mind goes to like Dementors, for example. Like it's fear and dread. It's like an analog for depression.
Right.
I think that's like a great classic like storytelling element, and it would be great to see Scarecrow get his due in that sense.
Yeah.
But I also don't mind what I have seen in the past either.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? There's people out there making videos about like kind of complaining about those things.
Yeah.
Which is totally fair, but they're also talking about like how Scarecrow is one of their favorite characters. And I think it's because that idea is so cool, right?
Yeah. It is a great idea.
And just the idea of sort of Batman being a character that's a lot about fear, right? Striking fear into the hearts of criminals and having that sort of turned around and like, okay, what is he afraid of? It's kind of a fundamentally like deconstructing way to approach Batman. So what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk a little bit about Golden Age Scarecrow itself in terms of Batman, or you want to talk about inspirations? I have a lot of notes on inspirations. I think that'll probably be the majority of the episode.
I'm actually really interested in inspiration.
Yeah.
Especially because we've already touched a little bit on Golden Age Scarecrow and like what the origins are, but I'm quite curious about where the idea came from.
I'm really excited to talk about it because we've spent the better part of a year talking about English inspirations. And I mean, when I say English, I mean like United Kingdom, right?
Yeah.
Great Britain. We talked about Spring Hill Jack, which is, an English Penny Dreadful. We talked about P.G. Wodehouse and Jeeves and Wooster, right, being an inspiration for Alfred. That's English. We talked about Charles Dickens a lot.
Yeah.
We talked about Jack the Ripper, which was, a London murderer, right? We talked a ton about sort of English inspirations.
Well, we also talked about just Victorian England in general.
We did, yeah. We had like that trilogy of episodes kind of late last year about that sort of thing. And that was fun. But I think this is the first character where I've done the research and it seems like squarely and like completely an American inspired character, which is really cool. All
that is cool.
The inspirations are from early America. Scarecrows go way back. Like I couldn't find any like actual history. People just claiming that like, oh yeah, there were scarecrows in Greece or there were scarecrows in ancient Egypt or there were scarecrows. Like the idea that you're going to have something that looks kind of like a human to scare off things.
I did not follow along. Okay, so you're talking about like the original like scarecrow thing you put in in your crops on a farm. Okay.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the idea is literally that like crows would come and like eat like corn or wheat or whatever. You could chase them off as a human and train them to be afraid of humans, right? Like with your rake or whatever and like yell at them and once they had learned that they should be afraid of you, you could like get like a stick. Yeah. And make something that looks kind of like a person, with like clothes and like stuff it full of straw. It was basically an inanimate watch for you to make sure that nothing would come for your crops. So there's no real history on like that. Like it's just it's such a basic idea that it goes way back.
Yeah. And it turns out that people are afraid of scarecrows too.
Really? Do you have any stories behind that or anything?
I mean, like Jeepers Creepers, like it starts out with like a scarecrow that like really creeps some people out, and it turns out there's something there, and the scarecrow comes to life and it kills a bunch of people.
Yeah,
there's other that's like seems like a classic trope of you're out in the woods, something scary is happening, and it's a scarecrow,
right?
Or like even just the beginning of The Wizard of Oz when she meets the scarecrow, it just creeps her the heck out because. It's like, that's not a person, that's a scarecrow. And then he like climbs down, essentially,
right. Something that you're not expecting to move does, or a person where you didn't expect one.
Yeah, it's a little bit of Uncanny Valley, I think.
Yeah. There's a small town in rural Japan, I think in Nagano maybe, where there's a lady there that has just been making scarecrows for like 30 years or 40 years or something like that. And so it's mostly abandoned. Like there's like 12 people that live there or something like that. But there's a bunch of old buildings like schools and, churches and whatever houses. And there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of scarecrows. And she's turned it into like a tourist attraction. So they come to see the scarecrows and take pictures and meet this old lady who makes scarecrows. So there's like a dozen YouTube videos out there about it. And it's creepy.
Yeah, it's just I bet it's super creepy. All you have to do is have one moving around, right? And then then your mind just goes crazy.
Yeah. For whatever reason, it captures the imagination of early Americans. You know, there are in the 1800s throughout, there's political cartoons, right? I have a couple that are pasted in the Google Doc, right? There's one of a bunch of Black Americans after the Civil War, after emancipation, during Reconstruction, who the government has promised, you know, that they're going to have reparations and have protection. And there's sort of this, you know, Southern guy realizing that that's toothless. Like the government's not actually there, because instead of an actual soldier, they have like a scarecrow of a soldier, right? There's another one, if you scroll down, that's a political cartoon where I forget the name of this guy. He's drawn as a crow, and it's kind of creepy. And he was a populist who was running against, I think, Teddy Roosevelt. And he's trying to get the nomination of his party, right? And the idea is that there's this scarecrow, but it's a patchwork of all these states: Indiana, Georgia, Vermont, right? And it's wearing a sash that says repudiation, and the cornfield that he's keeping him out of says nomination, right? And then in the back, there's the farmer with his gun, and he's wearing a bowler hat that says democracy on it, right?
And his gun says National Convention.
Yeah. And there's like dozens of these. If you just search like Scarecrow political cartoon United States, like for whatever reason, scarecrows were just super frequent at that time.
Oh, and you got the Wizard of Oz. I jumped the gun.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, that's okay. The book was written in 1900, so this is after kind of the period of the political cartoons. And the movie that you're familiar with, 1939. I watched it recently with Clark. Have you? What is your recollection of The Wizard of Oz?
It's scary as shit, and I probably won't let Calvin watch it for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting because like everyone, when I told people that we were going to watch it with Clark, they were like, you know, the flying monkeys are what's going to get him, or someone brought up the poppies, the sleeping poppies. That's kind of creepy or weird.
I don't remember that.
There's a scene where they first get out of the forest on the yellow brick road, and they first see the Emerald City, and there's a field of like red poppies, and they're like poison, and they make them all fall asleep, and they're in the field.
Oh, it's the pop. I thought that they were starting to fall asleep because of a spell that the witch had cast.
Yeah.
And okay, is that that's a separate scene though?
No, it's the same scene, but they're in a field of poppies.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's not okay. So it's not anything about the poppies specifically, just the.
I don't know if they specifically say the reason that they start falling asleep.
I will say it's been a long time since I've seen this movie. I just remember a lot of elements from it.
Well, so you might be thinking of the fact that the way they get out of the field is the good witch Galinda shows up, and they like superimpose her. Like 50%, like you know, opacity over the top, and she makes it snow, right? Yeah. What Clark really scared the crap out of him was the wizard. So the first time they show up at the wizard, and he's like this big floating green head, and there's fire. He like was like burrowed into my side, like I was holding him close. I was like, dude, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be fine. Yeah. But what's really important is the visual elements here. I'm convinced that Scarecrow in the Golden Age from Batman is styled to look like the Scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz movie.
I can see it.
He's wearing like brown pants, green shirt. He has the shirt is like kind of long, like I don't know how to describe that, like a smock, kind of comes down way past his waist, and he has a rope tied around his high waist, like your belly button, your true waist or whatever. Yeah. And then he's got a burlap sack over his head, and then a rope tied around his neck to keep it tight, and kind of a pointed hat, and then just like straw coming out of everywhere. Yeah. And then if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can see what Golden Age Scarecrow looks like. Yeah. He's got the burlap sack over his face. He's got a hat.
Smock. He's got the high-waisted rope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then straw hanging out everywhere. Yeah, totally.
And it was just 2 years before. So first Scarecrow, 1941. The movie, Wonderful Wizard of Oz, 1939. So like the timing is right.
The timing is just right. I got it.
Really high profile film. It was very, very, very expensive for them to make. It was one of the first color movies. A lot of people will say that Technicolor is a process where they go back and they color black and white film like it's painted by hand. That's not true. At the time, the way it worked was that they were actually shooting on 3 plates of film at once. And in order for that to work, like a red one, a green one, and a blue one, and then they combined it later. In order for that to work, it had to be insanely bright. So they had these like crazy bright lights inside this warehouse. There was no air conditioning, and so it would be like 120 degrees in there. Yeah, it was a train wreck of a development of a movie. From what I understand, they went through like 5 directors.
Yeah. There's like a lot of dark stuff about that too. And,
yes.
And like the how some of the like the Little People cast members were treated and
Yeah.
but I did learn that a lot of them took their earnings and they went and started a new community that was a bit of a paradise for them, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Was it the Tin Man got like lead poisoning and had to be replaced because of the makeup there? It wasn't lead poisoning. It was something
I think it was
else.
aluminum dust or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It was an inhalation thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had to be replaced. There's a lot of the lion is wearing an actual skinned lion. And then the apocryphal story about the person who hangs themselves in the woods.
I've not heard that one.
Oh, there's supposedly a scene where you're looking in the woods. If you look way in the background, you can see someone who is dead.
Oh, that's super not true.
And that's not true.
Because you definitely can tell it's not true because if you watch it now, like if you go and rent it on iTunes or whatever, they've done a 4K transfer and it's incredibly high quality. And you can tell that there's like 3 real trees and the rest is a painting. You know, they're very clearly in a warehouse the whole time.
That's funny. That's really funny. That's one of the big downsides of like higher resolution. Because like I remember when I watched The Hobbit, because that's 48 frames per second, and it's also like super high resolution. And I remember watching it in the theater, being like, "Oh, this is a set. That's a set.
Yes.
Those are actors." Like you lose a lot of the disrealistic elements. You know,
I think some of that with 24 frames per second is just because we're conditioned for this like suspension of disbelief. But yeah, no, for sure. I think when you have something that's like very high resolution, that's very high frame rate, and they haven't done a good job, you can tell. You know, it doesn't. I enjoyed it. Like it's kind of like a stage play almost. You know, the vibe's different. But one thing to keep in mind, so it was a high profile film because it was so expensive, and it was nominated for Best Picture Academy Award.
Not a winner. It nominated but didn't win. Oh,
it lost to Gone with the Wind.
Oh, of course. Okay.
Yeah. But it was considered not a financial success. So it did not make its money back and was kind of obscure until the 1950s when it was licensed to be aired on television.
Yeah. There's a lot of movies that were saved by television.
It kind of took off, and that's why it's famous and everyone knows it. It was because I think it was like ABC or something like that. They would air it once a year for like 6 years in a row or something like that. And it was like massive ratings event, like 6 million people tuned in or whatever.
Like the same with It's a Wonderful Life.
Okay, I believe that.
Like commercial failure, but now it's like a go-to like top 10 Christmas film because of television.
I mean, 2024, I paid like iTunes like $4 or whatever to rent it and watch it. And yeah, I think it's indisputable that it's a inspiration. In 1920, there's a Buster Keaton silent film called Scarecrow.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. It's, you know, I don't think it's necessarily part of the inspiration, but it's part of this like milieu. For whatever reason, like 1800s, early 1900s, America's like into scarecrows. It's a really, really weird movie. Buster Keaton is living in this house with this other guy. They do a lot of like vaudeville, like slapstick kind of humor.
Yeah.
And like it's so hard to explain. They live in this house where everything is like it's all one room, and you know their bathtub turns into a couch, and their sink turns into a chute that like sends food out to like be fed to the pigs, and like they have like salt and pepper and like plates and forks and knives like on pulleys hanging from the ceiling, and they do all kinds of like funny gags where they're like they put like a string around a quarter, and they put the quarter in the gas meter and pull it out because like apparently they had to pay for gas by the with a meter with a quarter inside the house to like cook the eggs, and then they're like eating together. It's like super weird. And then there's a love interest. They're both interested in the love interest, and they're like peacocking for this girl.
Nice.
And then they end up like making the father mad, and they're running. And they spend like half the movie running away from the dad, who's upset because they were trying to court the girl. And there's a part towards the end, where Buster Keaton like climbs up into a haystack, a gigantic haystack where they're baling hay, and he gets sent through the baler, which would kill you, by the way. But it does not for him.
Okay. All right.
In the movie. And I can't even remember the exact. Oh yeah, he's like in hiding in the bale of hay, but because he gets sent through the baler, he's not hiding there anymore. And then the dad comes and he has to go hide, and so he runs past a scarecrow, and he's like, and he goes back to the scarecrow, and then he gets inside the clothes and he stands next to the thing while the dad walks by. Anyway, they spend the rest of the movie, and he's running from the dad as a scarecrow, and he's got like hay inside his clothes, and he's wearing and that's how the movie gets its name.
Well, mega spoiler alert after the fact.
There's not much of a plot to speak of. It's just very vaudeville, very slapstick.
It sounds like classic Buster Keaton kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and which was super popular at the time. It was much more of a visual art than like a. They didn't really have thinker movies at the time.
To be honest with you, Wizard of Oz is very similar, actually. Like a lot of it is the spectacle of the sets. Like it's all very, very, very vibrant color and kind of like otherworldly. And then the other half of the movie is just the physicality of all the actors. The person who plays the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, they all are very vaudeville, very like the Scarecrow in particular does stuff with his body that I have no idea how he does it. Like he kind of walks and falls at the same time and dances. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the story itself is like super basic.
Yeah, there isn't one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a fever dream.
Yeah. Just a really quick one. The quarter on a fishing line, that totally worked at one point.
Oh, sure. I believe it.
And now there's some part of the mechanism that like actually like brings like a cutting thing through to make sure that like it cuts stuff.
I've seen people do it with like, again, in movies. Like I've never seen it in person because very few things were coin operated when I was a child. Yeah. And like by the time I was in college, they were all gone. I've seen people in movies and stuff do it on like payphones or like arcade machines, like pinball machines or whatever. What caught me off guard, what I had never heard of, was like you would have a coin in the gas meter inside your house. Like that's how you get natural gas to like run your stove, is that you would put a coin inside your house.
Wow.
At least that's how it was in the movie.
That's crazy. Can you imagine like the dude who has to drive around to like collect the coins for like wild. Wow. Yeah. That was like before the meter. It was like a literal.
Well, that's the thing, right? Now you have smart meters and they just drive around and it's all radio. But there used to be a person would come to the side of your house and
they used to read the odometer thing, the whatever that meter is.
Yeah.
But even before that, I guess it was like coin operated. That's nuts.
Yeah. What do you know about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow?
This is interesting. Okay, the Legend of Sleep. What do I know? Like I know the story pretty well.
Tell us.
I don't know so the Sleepy Hollow, essentially, there's like there's a haunting element where at night around a specific time, was it like Ichabod
Crane.
Oh, Crane. There you go. And there's a headless horseman who chases him through town, and he knows that if he gets across this bridge, it's probably based on like the history that there's certain types of spirits that don't cross running water or something. He's running to get across this bridge because he knows that he'll survive. But I guess he doesn't make it across the bridge, and this headless horseman I think cuts his head off.
I guess I don't know what happens in the movies and stuff. I know there's been many adaptations.
Okay, yeah.
But I did read the book. So Washington Irving is probably the first American author, right? So this is right after the Revolutionary War. Like culture is starting to, we're making some of our own, right? Washington Irving is the first person that writes sort of the American, I won't say novel because he was mostly short stories, right? Published in magazines and things like that. And he wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which takes about like an hour to read. It's like, I think it was like 25 pages on my e-reader or something like that. And the gist of the story is there's this guy named Ichabod Crane, and he is a traveling teacher. So he's from Connecticut.
Oh, that's right. He was a teacher.
Yeah. He's traveling all over, and he one year decides to take up residence in a town called Sleepy Hollow, which from what I understand is in New York. Basically a bunch of trees, houses are far spread apart from each other. There's a lot of farmers and things like that. And they have a schoolhouse where he teaches kids during the day. And because he's a traveling teacher and he doesn't have a home, and he definitely can't afford one based on the pay that he gets, he lives with the parents of his students 1 week at a time. So he'll stay with one family for a week, and then he'll go and stay with another family for a week, and he'll go stay with
weird.
another family for a week. Yeah. And he's described as like a really, really strange guy. I'll read you the description from the book. It says, in this place of nature, there abode in a remote period of American history, that is to say, some 30 years since, a worthy wight of the name of Ichabod Crane, who sojourned, or as he expressed it, tarried in Sleepy Hollow for the purpose of instructing the children of the vicinity. He was a native of Connecticut, a state which supplies the Union with pioneers for the mind as well as the forest, and sends forth yearly its legions of frontier woodsmen and country schoolmasters. The cognomen, I don't even know what that means. The cognomen of Crane was not inapplicable to his person. He was tall, but not exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindled neck, to tell which way the wind blew. To see him standing along profile in a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield.
Yikes. That's great visualization in that language. It also sounds like it could be the inspiration for Goofy.
Yeah. Kind of lanky guy. Kind of skinny and wears baggy clothes. He was not well to do, right?
But it also sounds like baggy small clothes, because they said his arms hung out of the sleeves, like he was too big for
Like he's poor.
Wide but not long clothes.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And tattered, right? So the gist is that like he's just a weird guy. And you know, he hit the kids a lot with the birch, the wooden, he caned them, right?
Yeah.
Spared them not the rod, suffer the wrath, something like that. I can't even remember the turn of phrase. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Spoil
That's
the
what it
child,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. He did not do that.
He did not spare the rod, yeah. But I also like the way that's described is like absolutely nails our introduction to Crane in World's Finest. Like he's bookish, he's weird.
Yes.
He's super skinny.
He's a professor in World's Finest.
Yeah, he's a professor. His clothes don't fit, and they're a little bit tattered because he doesn't care about that stuff.
Yes.
Wow.
The other teachers at his college make fun of him for the clothes.
Make fun of him. Yeah. So like note for note, like this is great inspiration. Good find.
It is Ichabod Crane. Yeah. Jonathan Crane, right? So it's very much Scarecrow. Just for completeness sake, if anyone's wondering, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, basically the gist of the story is that he is very much enthralled with a local girl who is the daughter of a very rich man. So
is this like a student aged or?
No. I think that she's an adult. She's an adult daughter.
Okay. I don't know how things are in those old times, and he's living with his students, right?
No. I don't think they said exactly how old she was, but not a child.
Cool. That's good.
Yes. There are other things in the book that are a little racist and things like that.
Yeah. Well, in your initial description, when you said it calls him like a white, something white.
Yes, but WIGHT, which is a racist turn of phrase because it's implying like white is good, but it is not speaking of his complexion.
Okay. All right. Bummer.
It gets worse than that in terms of racism.
Oh, I'm sure. No question. Yeah.
So he basically falls in love with this chick, and he has a rival, and the guy, I can't remember his name. What is the rival's name in Rival's Name, Legend of Sleepy Hollow?
Is it Bruce Wayne?
No.
Too bad.
Abraham Van Brunt, right? But his nickname is Brom Bones, right? And he's like the Gaston, right? He's like big and he's buff and he's like
he's
Hunter.
the opposite.
He's the man's man, right?
Yeah.
And they're both vying for this girl. I think her name is like Katrina
Van Tassel
or something like that.
Oh man, that makes me wonder if there's any connection to Beauty and the Beast, because she's super bookish and she's not into like the man's man Gaston style.
Yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
And for whatever reason, Ichabod thinks that she's into him. They all get invited to this party where, he professes his love to her and she's like, I'm good. And he's like, you gave me all the green lights. You know, I got all the signs, right? He goes and he hangs out by the fire with Brahm, who's also there, and a bunch of other dudes. And they're telling ghost stories about,
Oh, cool.
yeah, about the Headless Horseman, which like supposedly haunts Sleepy Hollow, right? And they describe him as a Hessian soldier. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hessians.
I kind of am. Is that where like assassin comes from? Hashashin or whatever?
I don't know. I just know
Okay.
that during the Revolutionary War, alongside the British fought German mercenaries. So they paid German people to come
It's
over.
not the origin of assassin then.
Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
I think Hessian is a word for German, question mark.
Okay.
But the idea is that like his head was shot off with a cannonball and now he's a ghost and he like haunts the hollow, right?
Dang.
Yeah. Rides his horse around, no head, chases people.
Wow. Okay. There is like an old there's an old, man, it might be Glory. There's an old Civil War movie from like the 90s where a guy gets his head blown off by a cannon.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious if
It's
they're
related.
if they're drawing any connection
Maybe.
to this lore.
Or maybe people got their heads blown off all the time in the Revolutionary
It
War.
seems
I don't
like
know.
It'd have to be unlikely.
Yeah.
But it's a way to go, right?
Yeah. Basically, they freak this guy out. And then he leaves the party. All of a sudden, there's a horse that starts chasing him. And it's a person who's headless. And it looks like he's got his head in front of him in the saddle. So that, you know, if you've ever seen the paintings or the pictures where the head's like he's carrying it by his side, it's not how it's described in the book. It's like in front of him, like while he's on the horse, right?
He's on like the horn or whatever, the very front part of the.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
What
That
you would
little
describe
thing
that.
that they at the front of the saddle that they like loop the rope around.
Yeah,
It's called the horn, but
They don't say. That would
Okay.
make sense, I guess. And he chases him through town. And to be honest with you, this portion, the chase scene, is basically the only part that's creepy at all, right? The book is not written as a horror. It's not, it doesn't strike me as Halloweenish. It doesn't strike me as scary. It's about a funny dude who, like, you know, doesn't know that he's weirdo, you know?
Oh man, that's so funny. Cause
Yeah.
like I'm already thinking about it as like it itself is
Yeah.
a like campfire ghost story that you tell.
And I think in the adaptations, they've done that. Like,
absolutely
It's supposed to
they
be
have.
a creepy, scary, spooky, you know, and when people retell the Headless Horseman. But that's the thing. That's all you remembered. So you didn't really remember anything about Ichabod Crane.
And it also makes me think that like is like if he dies at the end, is he dying of
doesn't die.
fear? Well, yeah, but the adaptations, right? Because that's kind of what's interesting here. If we're looking at like the Scarecrow origins, is like Ichabod Crane, did he die from fear because he heard the story and he just freaked out walking home and there is no headless horseman? Or Scooby-Doo style, did he like actually see the headless horseman right after he heard about him for the first time?
So the way the book ends is he crosses this bridge. You're right. He's trying to get across a bridge because he thinks
Yep.
it's like it can't cross it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
As he's crossing, the Headless Horseman takes his head and chucks it
Throws
at,
it. Oh,
at
that's
Ichabod.
right. Yeah.
It hits him in the head and he falls off the horse and he goes unconscious. All the people of the town wake up in the morning. They find his horse, Ichabod's horse, like in town, and it's without him. And all of his stuff is still at his house and he's not there. And Ichabod is nowhere to be found. And they like go to the creek and they find, on the ground, like one of his bags, Ichabod's bags, like his belongings, and the like remains of a pumpkin.
Yeah, the pumpkin. Yeah, totally. I thought that was just the Disney.
No, that's in the book.
Okay, Ichabod and Mr. Toad or whatever. Yeah.
And they all just assume that he's dead, right? And that the Headless Horseman got him.
Yeah.
But then at the very end of the book, they explain that the way that you're hearing the story is that Ichabod told someone at a bar once, and that person told me, and now I'm writing it, that he skipped town afterwards when he woke up, and like he became a lawyer and like did very well for himself, and left because he was rejected by Katrina
Van Tassel.
or whatever. We're to think that the head is the pumpkin and the Headless Horseman is Brahm. It's the Gaston. Right.
So he was playing a trick on him.
Yeah. They told him the ghost story to freak him out.
Oh, that's actually pretty funny. That's a
And
good
then
story.
chased him out of town.
I mean, it's like mean and stuff, but
It's the whole thing's
Yeah.
It's mean to the Ichabod character. He's meant to be like ridiculed or like
yeah, interesting. Huh. Well, yeah. Good story though.
It is a good story. It's a quick read. It took me about an hour to read it. There is a audiobook that was like 30 minutes long, or 30 minutes at two times, which I often do. But it does not strike me as a horror. It's kind of a funny story, if anything. Very descriptive. It's good writer. And yeah, there's 100%. There's no way that it's not an inspiration for the Golden Age Scarecrow. Golden Age Scarecrow doesn't have a fear toxin. Never does. So he only appears in 2 issues. Right, the one that we read on episode number 6, the Halloween episode of Bat Lessons, and then like a year or two later, there's a sequel, and it's bad, man. Like, in the first one, his only thing is that like he's into fear, right? He's teaching his students about fear. His colleagues make fun of him, so he decides that he's going to scare people. I don't even know. Like that's his entire motivation. And the second one, he gets out of prison, and then he's sorry. Go ahead.
I think his motivation was I want to be able to afford more books.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Right, and so then he starts like scaring people with ransom.
So stupid. Yes,
so that
that's right.
So he
his
can buy
colleagues
more
make
books.
fun of his suit, and he's like, "Of course, I didn't spend any money on my suit. I spent all my money on books."
Yeah. Rare editions and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's so dumb.
His motivation is money, but his specialization is fear. It kicks off with him describing the fear process and stuff.
Yeah. There's a scene where he's like explaining to his students. He like whips out a gun. And he's like, "You're afraid, right?" And then he fires the gun. He's like, "Now you're more afraid because before you didn't know if the gun would have bullets in it, but then when I fired it, now you do. So you're more afraid." Mm-hmm. As if that's like some sort of like profound finding. If I shoot a gun, you're going to be scared.
It may be profound to some college students. I don't know.
And then the second story, honestly, it's a Riddler story before Riddler's a thing, right? Like Riddler actually shows up later. He like leaves like clues about his next heist or whatever, his next crime that all rhyme. Like it's like hat is the clue, and then he goes to like a fashion show where they're selling hats, and then it's vats, and then there's like a vat of chemicals, and then there's mat or whatever. It's bad.
My goodness, that's pretty bad.
It's I almost floated it as a story for us to read today, and I was like, it's not worth it. and then doesn't appear again in the Golden Age at all, and honestly doesn't appear much in the Silver Age until sort of the latter half. Who does have a fear toxin in the Golden Age is Hugo Strange. There's like a fear dust that he uses sense. In Detective Number 46. So you really don't get the full formulation of Scarecrow being someone who uses, a fear chemical until much later. So it's interesting. He has the name and the fact that he's a teacher from Ichabod Crane, and he has the costume from The Wizard of Oz. That's about it.
I mean, that's pretty interesting. And those are all like pretty famous from history, right?
Yeah. And they're all like contemporaneous. They're American, which I love. And they're like, late 19th century, early 20th.
That's great, man. I think that stuff's really interesting, especially like breaking it down into its components where after having read that issue, it's like, oh, I see it totally. I see it, and then you do the next thing. It's like, oh, I see that too. I mean, I want to go from here and go watch, probably not read the book, but watch the Sleepy Hollow or something.
Oh yeah. It's a good Halloween movie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. And I'm really excited for us to come back to Scarecrow in the Silver Age. Because, how do you get from here to like fear toxin, syringes in the hands or whatever? Like there's a million different costumes he's had where he's less of a campy character or silly character, like derided by his peers, and more of an actual scary person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think what we've been seeing is that Golden Age is quite a bit more basic. It is like, especially like Bill Finger, there's always the heist or the burglary or whatever. Like they're motivated by money and stuff like that.
Always property crimes. Yeah.
And then as we've shifted more into Silver Age, it seems like more and more things about technology. Right. And so like, I think that's probably where this will happen. It'll be the marriage of like what the Scarecrow was with technology to utilize fear as part of his control.
Ryan, you're blowing my mind. I was doing a little bit of research, and the story that brings Scarecrow back in the Silver Age is a Gardner Fox story, and he's the person that introduces the bat plane and the batarang and the utility belt. Duh. Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, right? Okay. Well, I'm excited to come back. Maybe Halloween next year we'll do Scarecrow again, but in the Silver Age.
Part 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be Scarecrow Part 3.
Yeah.
Hey, Bat Fam, hope you like the show. If you do, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Stickers. We got stickers. It's a great way to support the show. Just $5. Link in the description and on batlessons.com. To keep the Batman history train going, watch this video next.